Jacob Hale had wanted quiet. After years of rushing through traffic, sitting in endless meetings and staring at glowing screens until his eyes ached, he wanted to disappear from the noise of the world, so he bought a cabin. It sat deep in the mountains, 3 hours from the nearest town, hidden among tall pine trees that swayed in the wind. The roof was old, the porch creaked, and the floorboards smelled faintly of pine resin. To Jacob, it felt perfect. He spent the first day cleaning, stacking firewood, and unpacking the few boxes he had brought. By the time night fell, the air outside was sharp and cold, and the stars above were so bright it made him dizzy to stare at them. He sat in an old wooden chair sipping from a chipped mug and smiled to himself. Finally, peace. But peace did not last. It started with a sound, a faint, metallic rattle somewhere under the floor. Jacob frowned. The cabin was old. He expected strange noises, pipes clanking, maybe rats or raccoons scratching under the floorboards. But this sound was different. It came again, a soft, slow clink, like metal on metal. He grabbed his flashlight and knelt down, ear pressed against the wood. There, a breath. Not the skitter of an animal, not the rustle of a mouse nest. A long, slow exhale, as though someone was hiding just beneath him. Jacob's skin went cold. He fetched a crowbar from the corner and began prying at the boards. The nails groaned as he worked them loose, sweat forming on his forehead despite the chill. When the first board came up, a rush of cold air rose from below, smelling of dirt and rust. Jacob shone the flashlight down. His breath caught. There was a space beneath the floor, a dugout cellar he hadn't known existed, and inside that cellar was a cage. The cage was made of black metal, the bars thick and bolted into the earth. Chains hung from its sides, and there was something inside, something sitting perfectly still in the shadows. Then, 2 eyes opened, not human eyes. They glowed faintly silver in the beam of his flashlight. Jacob's heart thudded in his chest. His grip on the crowbar tightened. And then the thing inside the cage spoke. Its voice was low, rough as if it had not been used for years. Human. Jacob stumbled back, nearly dropping the light. Release me. For a long moment, Jacob just stared. His mind screamed at him to run, to get in his truck and leave and never come back. But he didn't move. He couldn't look away from the figure in the cage. It was tall, far too tall to be a person, with long, corded muscles visible even through the dirt and scars that covered its body. Shackles were locked around its wrists and ankles, and its clothes were little more than torn rags. This was not an animal. It was someone. Jacob swallowed hard. What? What are you? He whispered. The creature's head tilted. I am warrior of the Koresh. I was taken, trapped, its glowing eyes fixed on him unblinking. You are not Hunter. You found me. Free me. Jacob hesitated. He didn't know what a Koresh was. He didn't know how this creature got here or who had locked it away, but there was something in its voice. Something tired. Something desperate. It wasn't begging. It wasn't threatening. It was simply stating the truth, as if it had nothing left but the hope that someone would listen. Jacob's chest felt tight. He had come out here to escape people, to escape responsibility. But now here he was, and the only person standing between this strange being and its cage. He took a slow breath. Okay, he said finally, his voice shaking. I'll try. He climbed down into the cellar, boots crunching on the packed dirt. The air was colder down here, and he could hear the faint sound of chains dragging as the creature shifted. The padlock on the cage door was old, rusted. Jacob pulled at it, but it didn't budge. He looked around, found an old iron bar lying nearby, and wedged it against the lock. It took minutes of straining, grunting, and hammering before the lock finally snapped with a loud crack. The cage door swung open. The creature stepped out slowly. Jacob tensed, heart racing, every muscle ready to bolt. But instead of attacking, the alien did something he never expected. It knelt. You are free among my kind, it said quietly. I owe you my life. Jacob just stood there staring, the reality of what he had done finally sinking in. He had freed it. And whatever came next, there was no going back. Jacob barely slept that night. He sat in the chair by the fire, staring at the creature, the alien, sitting silently in the corner. Its glowing silver eyes never closed. It didn't seem to need sleep. At one point, Jacob asked its name. It was quiet for a long time before answering. "My name in your tongue is difficult," it said slowly. "You may call me Vec," Jacob nodded, though it didn't make him feel better. He had freed something he didn't understand, and now it was in his cabin. When morning came, Jacob brewed coffee with shaking hands. Vec didn't move until Jacob set the steaming mug down near him. "You drink this?" Jacob asked. Vec sniffed the coffee, tilted his head, then pushed it away. "My kind does not take your bitter drink," he said. His voice was deep, steady, and calm. Too calm. "Right," Jacob muttered, sipping from his own mug. "Guess we'll skip breakfast talk." The silence was heavy. Finally, Jacob asked the question that had been burning in his mind all night. "Who put you in that cage?" Vec's eyes narrowed. "Hunters," he said. "Your kind, but not of your tribe. Men who trade lives for currency. They came in ships. I was taken, sold, brought here." Jacob's stomach twisted. "Sold to who?" "Do not know." "Do not care. All that matters is I was caged." Vec looked toward the door, toward the trees outside. "They will return." Jacob's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. "Wait, they'll come back here?" "Yes. Today?" Vec didn't answer. He didn't have to. It started around noon. Jacob had just stepped outside to chop firewood when he saw them. Tracks in the snow. Big ones. Boots, but heavier than anything a hunter from town would wear. They weren't there last night. Jacob felt his stomach drop. He went back inside fast. "They're here," he said, his voice low. Vec was already standing. His shackles clinked softly as he moved toward the window. He sniffed the air, a low growl rising in his throat. "Yes," he said simply. Jacob grabbed his phone. No signal. No service this far up the mountain. The sound came next, the crunch of boots on snow, closer this time. And then the smell of smoke, faint but unmistakable. "They are burning the trail," Vec said. "Hiding where they came from." Jacob's chest tightened. "What do we do?" "We fight," Vec said. "Fight?" Before Jacob could argue, something slammed against the side of the cabin. Hard. The windows rattled, then came the first gunshot. Glass exploded inward. Jacob dove to the floor, heart pounding. His ears rang from the blast. Vec moved like lightning. 1 second he was by the window, the next he was gone, out the back door and into the trees. Shouts erupted outside. Muffled, angry voices, not speaking English. Then came the screams. Jacob crawled to the corner, clutching the crowbar, heart hammering. He could hear Vec in the woods, hear the sound of something heavy moving fast, hear men shouting and then going suddenly, horribly silent. The forest grew quiet again, except for the crunch of snow. Vec returned. Blood not his own, streaked across his claws. "They will not stop," he said simply. "More will come." Jacob stared at him, chest heaving. "We can't stay here." "No." Vec glanced toward the mountains. "We must move before nightfall." "Where?" Jacob asked. Vec looked up toward the sky. "North," he said. "There's a beacon I hid when I was taken. If I reach it, my clan will hear. They will come." Jacob shook his head. This was insane. He didn't know what he was agreeing to. He didn't even know if Vec was telling the truth. But he looked at the shattered windows, at the blood on the floor, at the bullet holes in his cabin walls. Staying was not an option. "Fine," Jacob said finally, grabbing his backpack from the corner. "Then we go now." Vec nodded once. "We run," he said. And together, they stepped out into the cold. The forest felt different now. Every creak of a tree branch sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. Jacob followed close behind Vec, boots crunching in the snow, trying to keep his breathing quiet. "Will they follow?" he whispered. "Yes," Vec said without turning. "They will not let me go." Jacob's grip tightened on the crowbar. This was no longer about peace and quiet. This was survival, and the hunters were already closing in. The snow crunched under Jacob's boots as he stumbled after Vec, clutching the crowbar like a lifeline. The forest seemed endless, dark and silent except for their footsteps. His breath steamed in the cold air, coming out in ragged bursts. "How far is this beacon?" Jacob asked between gasps. "Far," Vec said without slowing. We must keep moving. Jacob glanced over his shoulder. The cabin was far behind them now, hidden by the trees. The smoke from the gunfire still hung faintly in the air. His cabin, his escape, his quiet life was gone. Now there was only the forest. And the hunt. By late afternoon, the sky had turned gray. Thick clouds rolled in and the temperature dropped. Jacob's legs burned. His shoulders ached from carrying the pack, but every time he slowed, Vec looked back and growled softly, urging him forward. They are close, Vec said once. Jacob froze. How do you know? Vec tapped his temple. I can smell them. That sent a chill through Jacob that had nothing to do with the cold. When night fell, they found shelter under a rocky outcrop. Vec crouched near the entrance, scanning the woods while Jacob huddled near a small fire they dared to light. His hands shook as he opened a can of beans and ate straight from the tin. Vec didn't eat. Instead, he sat in silence, staring into the darkness as if he could see something Jacob couldn't. Why are they after you? Jacob asked finally. Vec's silver eyes flicked toward him. I am Koresh, he said simply. Our kind are hunted because we are strong. We do not kneel to slavers. They fear us, Jacob swallowed hard. And now they're after me too. Vec didn't look away. You freed me. That makes you target. Jacob laughed once bitterly. Great, that's just great, but deep down, he knew he wouldn't have done it any differently. The fire burned low. Jacob was just starting to drift off when Vec's head snapped up. Move, Vec hissed. Jacob blinked. What now? Vec grabbed him by the arm and yanked him to his feet. The fire was kicked out in one motion. Then Jacob heard it. The crunch of snow. Not far. Not one set of footsteps. Several. Shadows moved between the trees. The hunters had found them. Run, Vec said. Jacob didn't argue. They sprinted through the trees, the snow sucking at Jacob's boots. Behind them came shouts, the sound of branches breaking, the unmistakable metallic click of rifles being readied. Jacob's lungs burned. His heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. Then came the first shot. The crack of it split the night air. Bark exploded from a tree beside Jacob's head. He ducked, stumbled, nearly fell. But Vec grabbed the back of his jacket and hauled him forward. Keep moving. They weaved through the forest, zigzagging between trees as bullets tore through the snow around them. Jacob's crowbar slipped from his hand and disappeared into the drifts. He didn't dare stop to retrieve it. Finally, Vec shoved him behind a fallen log. Stay here, he said. What? Where are you? But Vec was already gone. A blur of motion in the dark. Jacob pressed his back against the frozen wood, trying to make himself small, trying not to breathe too loud. He could hear them now. The hunters, their voices low and harsh. Then he heard something else. A roar. It wasn't human. The forest erupted with chaos. Shouts, gunfire, screams cut short. Something crashed through the underbrush. Something heavy. Jacob's heart hammered. He couldn't see what was happening. Only flashes of movement in the dark, then silence, heavy. Awful silence. Vec returned, breathing hard. Blood splattered across his chest. They are dead, he said simply. Jacob stared at him wide-eyed. You killed them? Vec's expression was unreadable. They would have killed you. And me, Jacob didn't argue. He just nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. He realized then that this was no longer just about hiding. They weren't prey anymore. Not if Vec had anything to say about it. They didn't rest again until dawn. Jacob sat with his back against a tree, shivering, exhausted. Vec crouched beside him, scanning the horizon. They will send more, Vec said. We must keep moving. Jacob nodded slowly. His fear was still there, sharp and cold, but beneath it, something new had begun to grow. Resolve. If they were going to survive this, he would have to be more than just a scared man running for his life. He would have to fight. By mid-morning, Jacob's whole body ached. His legs felt like lead. His lungs burned with every breath. But Vec never slowed. The alien moved through the forest like he belonged there, weaving between trees, stepping over roots without a sound. Jacob tried to keep up, stumbling, tripping, nearly falling, but Vec never let him drop. We are close, Vec said at last. Jacob blinked at him, panting. Close to what? The beacon. Jacob looked around. The trees all looked the same. Snow stretched in every direction. "You're sure?" Vec didn't answer. He just sniffed the air, his silver eyes narrowing. Then he growled. "Down," he hissed. Jacob didn't argue. He hit the snow, heart hammering. Vec crouched low, scanning the woods. "They follow," he said softly. "More than before." Jacob's throat went dry. "How many?" "Enough." The air seemed to grow colder. "Can we run?" Jacob asked. "No." Vec reached into the snow and pulled out a sharp piece of broken metal, part of an old trap, rusted but still lethal. He handed it to Jacob. "You will fight," Vec said. Jacob stared at it, his breath clouding in the air. "I'm not—" "You are now." Jacob's hand shook as he gripped the metal. His mind screamed at him to run, to hide, to find some hole to crawl into. But there was nowhere left to hide. The first hunter appeared between the trees, a dark shape moving through the snow. Then another, and another. They came from every side. Jacob's chest tightened. They were surrounded. The hunters spoke in a language Jacob didn't know. One pointed at him, barked something, then raised his weapon. Vec roared. The forest exploded into chaos. Jacob dove behind a tree as gunfire tore through the clearing. Snow flew into the air in white sprays. Vec was already moving, a blur of claws and teeth slamming into the nearest hunter with bone-breaking force. Jacob's heart pounded. He clutched the shard of metal so tightly it cut into his palm. Then he saw one of the hunters break off from the fight, raising his rifle and aiming straight at Vec's back. Jacob didn't think. He ran. He slammed into the hunter with all his weight, knocking him off balance. The rifle went off with a deafening crack, the bullet flying harmlessly into the trees. Before Jacob even knew what he was doing, he drove the piece of metal into the man's side. The hunter gasped and fell, snow staining dark beneath him. Jacob staggered back, staring at his hands. He had just... There was no time to think. Another hunter charged toward him. Jacob grabbed the fallen rifle, raised it, and pulled the trigger. The kick nearly threw him back, but the shot hit true. The hunter dropped. When the clearing finally fell silent, Jacob was shaking all over. The snow was torn and bloody. Several hunters lay still. The rest had fled into the trees. Vec stood in the middle of it all, his chest heaving, blood running down his arms. Not all of it his own. He turned to Jacob. "You fought," Vec said. His voice held something new this time. Not just approval, but respect. Jacob swallowed hard. His hands were numb, the rifle still clutched in them. "I didn't have a choice," he said quietly. Vec shook his head. "There is always choice. You chose to stand." Jacob's heart still hammered. But he realized Vec was right. He could have run, he didn't, and now, for the first time since this nightmare began, he didn't feel like prey. "Come," Vec said after a moment. "The beacon is near." They pushed deeper into the forest, following a narrow trail that climbed higher into the mountains. As they walked, Jacob felt the weight of what had just happened settle over him. He had taken a life. 2, maybe, and yet instead of drowning in guilt, there was something else building inside him, something fierce, something alive. For the first time, Jacob wanted them to come, let the hunters follow. He was ready. The climb grew steeper as they moved deeper into the mountains. Snow fell harder now, a thin curtain that blurred the trees and muffled their footsteps. Jacob's legs burned, but he didn't complain. The rifle in his hands felt heavier than before, but he kept it close. Finally, Vec stopped. "We are here," he said. Jacob looked around. All he saw was a small clearing, half buried in snow. Then Vec crouched and began digging, his claws cutting through ice and frozen soil like knives. Within minutes, he uncovered something metallic, a small round device covered in strange markings. "This is it," Vec said. Jacob knelt beside him. "That's your beacon?" Vec nodded. "If I activate this, my clan will hear me. They will come for us." Jacob's chest tightened. "How long?" "Not soon enough," Vec said grimly. Jacob frowned. "What do you mean?" Vec's silver eyes narrowed. "They are already here." The first shot rang out a second later. Snow exploded near Jacob's boots, spraying up into his face. "Down!" Vec roared, shoving Jacob to the ground. More shots tore through the clearing. Bullets ripped into trees, pinged off the metal beacon. "They will destroy it," Vec snarled. Jacob's stomach nodded. If the beacon was lost, there would be no help. "What do we do?" Jacob shouted over the gunfire. "We hold them," Vec growled. "Until the beacon sends the call." Jacob swallowed hard. There was no running this time. He rolled behind a fallen tree, raised the rifle, and waited. The hunters emerged from the trees, dark shapes moving through the swirling snow. Jacob's breath caught. There were at least a dozen of them. Maybe more. Vec leapt first, a blur of motion as he slammed into the nearest hunter and sent him crashing into the snow. Jacob squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, but the shot hit, dropping one of the hunters before he could fire. Adrenaline surged through him. He fired again and again. The clearing became a storm of gunfire and roaring, Vec's growls mixing with the screams of the men he tore through. One of the hunters broke through the line, charging straight at the beacon. "No!" Jacob shouted. He swung the rifle toward the man and fired. The shot hit him in the chest, spinning him backward. Jacob's ears rang, his shoulder ached from the recoil, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Every shot felt easier than the last. Vec was a whirlwind, claws flashing, his massive frame moving faster than Jacob could follow, but there were too many of them. A bullet grazed Vec's shoulder, another tore through his side. He stumbled, snarling in pain. Jacob's stomach lurched. He fired at the man who had shot Vec, hitting him square in the throat. The hunter dropped, gurgling, and Jacob turned to the next. Then, suddenly the beacon came alive. It hummed, glowing bright blue, the sound low and resonant, vibrating through the ground. Vec looked up, breathing hard. "It is done," he said. Jacob's relief was short-lived. More hunters were coming. He could hear them. Boots crunching on snow, shouts in the distance. "We can't hold them all," Jacob said, panic creeping into his voice. Vec rose to his full height despite his wounds. "Then we die fighting." Jacob gritted his teeth, bracing the rifle against his shoulder. "No," he said, voice steady now. "Then we make them run." He stood beside Vec, ready, waiting for the next wave to break through the trees. The snow was red now. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding, but he was no longer the man who had come to this cabin looking for peace. He was something else now. And when the next shot rang out, Jacob fired back first. The fight that followed was chaos, pure and wild. Jacob moved without thinking, firing, reloading, firing again. Vec fought beside him, every movement precise and deadly. The hunters pressed forward and then broke, one by one. They turned and fled back into the trees. The clearing fell silent except for Jacob's ragged breathing. He lowered the rifle, snow sticking to his gloves. They had survived for now. Vec straightened slowly, blood running down his arm. "They will bring more," he said. "But next time, my clan will be here." Jacob nodded, staring at the glowing beacon. For the first time, he let himself believe it. Help was coming. Snow still fell softly, covering the blood that stained the clearing. Jacob sat on a half-buried log, his rifle across his lap. His hands trembled as he reloaded, one bullet at a time until the magazine was full. Across from him, Vec crouched near the beacon. The device still glowed faintly, its low hum vibrating through the earth. "How long until they come?" Jacob asked quietly. Vec didn't look up. "Hours. Maybe more." Jacob nodded, though the answer did nothing to calm him. Every tree felt like an enemy. Every gust of wind sounded like approaching footsteps. "They'll come back," Jacob said after a long silence. "Yes. And they'll bring more." "Yes," Vec repeated. Jacob ran a hand over his face. "So we just sit here and wait to die?" Vec's silver eyes finally met his. "No," he said firmly. "We wait to live." Jacob stared at him. "How can you be so calm?" he asked. "And you're bleeding. You've been through hell, and you're just sitting there like this is nothing." Vec tilted his head. "Because fear wastes strength, and I will need all my strength when they come." Jacob looked down at his own hands. They were still shaking, though he wasn't sure if it was from cold or adrenaline. He took a slow breath, trying to steady them. "You've done this before, haven't you?" he asked. Vec was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he said at last. "I have fought many hunts. I have lost many battles." His gaze grew distant. "But I have never been caged before, until your kind took me." Jacob's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Vec looked at him with something like surprise. "You freed me." You are not the ones who did this. Still, Jacob said. You were alone down there, for who knows how long. And I almost left you there. But you did not, Vec said simply. Jacob nodded, staring at the snow. For a moment, the forest was quiet except for the low hum of the beacon. Then Vec said something that made Jacob look up. You fight well, for one who has never hunted. Jacob gave a short, humorless laugh. I was terrified. As you should be, Vec said. Fear keeps you alive. But you did not run. You stood. Jacob thought about that. When this began, he had wanted to run, to get in his truck and leave it all behind. But now, running didn't feel like an option anymore. Maybe it never had been. Vec stood slowly, testing his injured arm. The wound in his side had stopped bleeding, but he moved more stiffly than before. Jacob saw it and frowned. You're hurt worse than you're letting on. I will heal, Vec said. Jacob dug through his pack, pulling out a roll of bandages from the small first aid kit he'd brought. Sit, Jacob said. Vec hesitated, then lowered himself onto the snow. Jacob knelt and began wrapping the wound as best he could. The alien's skin was thicker than a human's, but the bullet had left an ugly gash. You know, Jacob said, focusing on his work. When I bought that cabin, I thought the hardest thing I'd have to deal with was fixing the leaky roof. Vec's mouth curled slightly, the closest thing Jacob had seen to a smile. Life is not roof, Vec said. Life is fight. Always fight. Jacob tied the bandage tight and sat back. Well, he said, I guess I'm learning fast. The hours crawled by. Jacob and Vec took turns watching the tree line. The snow deepened. The wind howled softly through the pines. Jacob's thoughts kept circling back to the fight, the faces of the men he had shot, the way it had felt to hold the rifle, to pull the trigger and know he was fighting for his life. He expected to feel guilt, but what he felt instead was ready. Ready for them to come back. Ready to end this. Just before dusk, Vec's head snapped up. They are near, he said. Jacob's grip tightened on the rifle. How many? Vec's silver eyes narrowed. All of them, he said. Jacob swallowed hard and got to his feet. This was it. The final hunt. And this time he wasn't just trying to survive. He was going to win. The forest went silent. Jacob gripped the rifle so tightly his knuckles turned white. His breath steamed in the icy air as he crouched behind the fallen log. They are here, Vec said, his voice low and steady. Jacob's pulse thudded in his ears. How close? He whispered. Vec sniffed the air, then bared his teeth. Close enough. The first flare arced through the night sky, bright red, hissing as it lit the clearing in a bloody glow. Jacob flinched at the sudden light. The hunters were no longer hiding. Dark figures appeared between the trees, spreading out, rifles raised. Their leader shouted something in a harsh language Jacob didn't understand. Vec growled deep in his chest. They come to finish it, he said. Jacob swallowed. Hard. Then let's finish it, he said. Vec glanced at him, and this time, he nodded. The first shot rang out, then another. Jacob dropped to one knee, sighted down the rifle and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the clearing, hitting one of the hunters square in the chest. Vec charged, a blur of claws and muscle, slamming into the enemy line with a roar that shook the night. The hunters fired back, bullets kicking up snow all around them. Jacob dove behind the log, heart hammering, then popped up and fired again. One hunter fell. Another. Still they came. The air stank of gunpowder and blood. Jacob moved on instinct now, reloading as fast as his frozen fingers would allow, firing until the rifle clicked empty. He grabbed a fallen hunter's weapon and kept shooting. Every shot felt easier than the last. Every time a hunter dropped, Jacob felt something hot and fierce rise inside him. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was winning. Vec fought like a storm. Every time he tore through an attacker, Jacob saw another step in the snow and another hunter trying to flank them. Left. Jacob shouted. Vec spun, claws flashing, taking the man down before he could fire. They were moving as one now, man and alien, and back to back, defending the beacon together, but there were too many. Jacob's stomach sank as he saw another wave of hunters emerge from the trees. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Vec snarled, blood running down his side. We cannot hold, he said. Jacob's chest tightened. No, he said through gritted teeth. We can. He raised the rifle again. Then the sky split open. A deafening hum filled the air as a massive shape descended through the clouds. Sleek and black, glowing with blue light. The beacon's hum rose in answer. They heard me, Vec said, his voice suddenly fierce. The ship landed in the clearing with a roar of displaced snow. Figures emerged. Tall, armored warriors, each one carrying weapons that gleamed like molten silver. The hunters froze. Then, for the first time, they broke, one by one. They turned and fled into the trees. Jacob stood there, chest heaving, rifle still raised. The alien warriors spread out, forming a wall between him and the retreating hunters. Vec straightened, bloodied but unbowed, and called out to them in a language Jacob couldn't understand. One of the warriors stepped forward, towering over Jacob. This human freed me, Vec said, his voice carrying across the clearing. He fought at my side. He is ally. The warrior looked Jacob up and down, then nodded once. You are honored among the Koresh, the warrior said in a deep, rumbling voice. Jacob blinked, still trying to catch his breath. Honored. He had gone from a man looking for peace and quiet to this standing in the snow covered in blood, recognized by warriors from another world. The remaining hunters were gone now. The forest quiet once more. Jacob lowered the rifle slowly. His whole body ached, but he was still standing. For the first time since this began, he let himself breathe. It was over, at least. For now. Vec placed a clawed hand on Jacob's shoulder. You are no longer prey, he said. Jacob nodded. Good, he said softly, because I'm done running. The clearing was quiet now. The snow was trampled and stained dark, the trees around them scarred with bullet holes. The beacon still glowed, casting a faint blue light over everything, but the hum was softer now, steady and calm. Jacob stood there, the rifle hanging loose in his hands. He felt empty, exhausted, like everything had been burned out of him. Vec walked past him and knelt beside one of the fallen hunters, checking that he was truly dead. They will not return tonight, Vec said finally. Jacob nodded, though his legs felt too weak to stand much longer. He sank down onto a log and stared at the ground. The faces of the men he had killed flashed through his mind. One after another, their screams, the way the rifle had kicked against his shoulder each time he fired. He thought he would feel guilt. But what he felt was something else. Not pride. No, not that, but a strange, quiet certainty. He had done what needed to be done, and he would do it again. The Koresh warriors moved silently around the clearing, checking the perimeter, gathering the fallen hunters' weapons into a pile. One of them approached Jacob and crouched down in front of him. You fought well, the warrior said. Jacob managed a tired half-smile. I was just trying not to die. That is where every warrior begins, the Koresh said simply. Jacob looked around at them, tall, powerful, calm, even after the battle. He realized with a start that they reminded him of Vec, and then he realized that Vec was no longer just the strange creature he had found in the cage. He was something closer to a friend. Vec came to stand beside him, his injuries now wrapped with clean bandages provided by his clan. You are changed, Vec said quietly. Jacob let out a tired laugh. Yeah, I guess I am. You fought as Koresh fight, Vec said. You stood when others would fall. Jacob's chest tightened. You make it sound like that means something. It does, Vec said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vec asked the question Jacob hadn't been expecting. Will you come with us? Jacob looked up sharply. With you? To where? Vec gestured toward the massive ship waiting in the clearing, its engines glowing softly. To the stars, Vec said. To my homeworld. To where no hunter can touch you again. Jacob stared at the ship. He had dreamed once of escape, of leaving behind the city, the noise, the constant grind of life. And he had found it here. But now, he wasn't sure this place was his home anymore. Not after everything that had happened. I don't know, Jacob admitted. Vec tilted his head. You are free to choose. But know this, if you stay, others may come. Hunters who do not fear this place. They will not forget you." Jacob swallowed hard. He knew Vec was right. The hunters would return one day. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next year. But eventually, and then he would be alone again. Jacob looked down at his hands. Scarred, bruised, still smeared with dirt and blood. He thought of the man he had been when he came here, quiet, tired, desperate for peace. That man was gone now. The forest, the cabin, the fight, they had burned him away, leaving something harder, sharper. He looked up at the ship again. It wasn't just an escape, it was an invitation, a chance to see the stars, a chance to be part of something bigger than himself. Jacob stood slowly. "Not tonight," he said at last, "but maybe soon." Vec studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "When you are ready," he said, "call to me, and I will come." Jacob let out a long breath. For now, the fight was over. But the war, the real one, might still be waiting somewhere out there, and part of him wanted to meet it head-on. The next morning, the clearing was empty. The ship was gone, leaving only scorched snow where its engines had burned the ground. The Koresh warriors had taken their dead, their wounded, and the captured weapons of the hunters. Only Jacob remained. He stood there for a long time, staring at the sky where the ship had vanished. The world felt too quiet now, too empty. When the wind shifted, he caught the smell of smoke in the distance, his cabin, what was left of it. By midday, Jacob reached the place that had once been his refuge. The cabin was barely standing. The windows were shattered, the porch half collapsed, bullet holes riddling the walls. It looked like a war zone. Jacob stood there in the snow, staring at it, the rifle slung across his back. He thought about leaving, about walking down the mountain and never coming back, but something stopped him. This was his place. He had bled for it, fought for it. He wasn't about to let it rot. Jacob spent the next several days repairing what he could. He scavenged planks, nailed broken boards back into place, swept away the shattered glass. Every hammer strike felt like a promise that he wouldn't run, that he wouldn't let what had happened here turn him into someone afraid to live. At night, he sat by the fire, listening to the forest. Every sound still made his heart race, and the crack of a branch, the howl of the wind, but he forced himself to stay put, to listen, to be still. One night, he took the rifle outside and set it against the wall near the door, just in case. He wasn't the man he used to be, the one who wanted to hide from the world. If danger came again, he'd be ready. The days passed slowly. Jacob fell into a rhythm. Chop wood, repair walls, patch the roof. His muscles ached constantly, but the work felt good. Honest, grounding. And every now and then, when the sky was clear, he would step outside and look up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Vec was alive. Somewhere out there, the Koresh were fighting their battles. And part of Jacob wondered if he should be there too. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Jacob found himself standing at the edge of the clearing where he had first uncovered the hidden cellar. The boards he had pried up were gone, the hole filled back in with dirt. But he still remembered the moment he first saw those glowing, silver eyes staring up at him from the darkness. It felt like a lifetime ago. He realized then that the man who had found that cage, the man who hesitated, who was scared, wasn't the man standing here now. Something had changed. Forever. Jacob picked up a piece of wood and carved something into it with his knife. When he was finished, he hammered it into the ground beside the repaired cabin door. It was a simple sign, no words, just a mark he remembered from the Koresh warrior's armor, one they had told him meant protector. It was a warning to anyone who came looking for trouble, and a reminder to himself. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was standing guard. That night, Jacob sat on the porch, rifle across his lap, firelight flickering behind him. The forest was quiet, peaceful even. But he knew peace didn't last forever. And when the next storm came, whether it was hunters or something worse, he wouldn't be the man running for cover. He would be ready. Winter was nearly over when it happened. Jacob had just finished stacking the last of the firewood when he saw it, a light in the sky. At first, he thought it was just a star brighter than the rest, but then it moved slowly, deliberately, not like a plane, not like anything human. Jacob's heart skipped a beat. He set down the axe and stepped into the clearing, his breath fogging in the cold air. The light pulsed once, twice, 3 times, then it vanished. But a moment later, a faint sound rose from inside the cabin. A low hum. Jacob froze. The beacon. He ran inside and found the device sitting on the table, right where he had left it weeks ago. It was glowing again, faint and steady. Then in a flash of light, a symbol appeared on its surface, the same mark Jacob had carved into the wood outside his door. And then a voice spoke, low and resonant. "Human, ally, are you ready?" Jacob's breath caught. It wasn't just a recording, it was Vec. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, Vec was speaking to him. Jacob swallowed hard. His eyes flicked to the rifle leaning against the wall, to the patched-up cabin around him, to the quiet forest outside. For a long moment, he didn't answer, then he smiled. "Yeah," he said softly, "I think I am." He packed slowly, methodically, a few tools, a few supplies. He stood in the cabin doorway one last time, staring at the little home he had rebuilt with his own hands. This was where it had started. This was where he had become someone new. But it wasn't where his story ended. Jacob slung the rifle across his back and stepped outside. The night sky was clear, glittering with stars. Somewhere up there, a ship was waiting, and somewhere beyond that, a war was being fought, one he had already joined whether he liked it or not. He walked to the edge of the clearing, the snow crunching under his boots. Then he raised his hand toward the sky. The beacon flared in response, a beam of blue light shooting upward into the darkness. Minutes later, the forest shook. A shadow swept across the clearing as a massive ship descended silently, its engines glowing like a second sunrise. Jacob's heart pounded as he watched it land, the snow swirling in the exhaust. The ramp lowered and a tall, armored figure stepped out. Vec, he looked different now, healed, standing tall, his silver eyes brighter than ever. "You called," Vec said. Jacob nodded. "You came." Vec's mouth curved in something close to a smile. "Are you ready, human?" Jacob took one last look at the cabin, at the forest, at the mountains that had once been his escape, and now felt like the place he had been reborn. Then he stepped forward. "Yes," he said. Vec held out his clawed hand, and Jacob took it. Together they walked up the ramp and into the ship. As the engines roared and the ground fell away, Jacob looked out the window one last time. The cabin grew smaller, the forest shrinking into a patchwork of white and green, and then it was gone. Swallowed by the night, Jacob turned his gaze forward, toward the stars. Whatever was waiting for him out there, battles, dangers, wonders, he wasn't afraid anymore. He was ready. The ship tilted upward and soared into the sky, leaving Earth behind. And Jacob Hale, once a man looking for peace, vanished into the stars.